Well, good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. You'd think the near assassination of Republican Congressman Steve Scalise by a Democratic activist last week would have set off some soul-searching on the left about the growing strain of violent extremism in its midst. If you fantasize about hurting people long enough, somebody's going to get hurt, and now somebody has. But no. In fact, the opposite has happened. Throughout the progressive world, in politics, in entertainment, on MSNBC, in higher education, talk of violence has, if anything, grown louder since those shootings. Here's the latest. It comes from Nebraska. Phil Montag, a longtime liberal activist and official with the state's Democratic Party, caught on tape applauding the shooting of Steve Scalise.
I hate this mother. Yeah. I'm glad he got shot.
We've laid in
I'm glad he got shot.
Dude.
I'm not going to say that in public.
Well, then what are you saying it to us for?
Say something. Say something.
What are you telling us for?
I wish he was dead.
I'm glad he got shot. No subtlety there. Well, at Trinity College in Connecticut, professor of racism studies Johnny Williams agreed with that. He wrote this on social media after the shootings, quote, "Let them effing die." Williams wasn't fired from his post, far from it. His fellow Trinity faculty issued a fawning letter of support for him today. One colleague compared him to Salman Rushdie, persecuted by religious extremists. In this case, of course, Christians, not Islamists. A Change.org petition supporting Williams has drawn nearly 2,000 signatures as of tonight, and it's growing. Professor Let Them Effing Die is fast becoming a folk hero on the left. Meanwhile, fading actor Johnny Depp says he's excited about the possibility of a modern-day John Wilkes Booth stepping forward to murder the president.
When was the last time an actor assassinated a president?
Well, on Twitter, Marcela Arguello, she's a writer for Bill Nye's new Netflix show, had this to say about the Scalise shooting, quote, "If a few old-ass conservative white men have to die in order to get the gun control issue discussed, then I'm willing to take that risk." As of tonight, she's apparently still got her job. And extremism isn't just online. Having just watched partisanship ending in gunfire, you'd think lawmakers might try to lower the temperature a little bit. Not Elizabeth Warren of Massachusetts. Here she is accusing her Republican colleagues of deliberately plotting to kill Americans for money.
These cuts are blood money. People will die. Let's be very clear. Senate Republicans are paying for tax cuts for the wealthy with American lives.
Okay, so you disagree with me on a piece of legislation, therefore you're a murderer. This is how things fall apart, when you no longer see political differences as legitimate, but instead as moral crimes. When you begin to believe your opponents are unworthy of life itself. When you start to make excuses for violence. That is all happening now. What do you think happens next? America's worth living in because we have a stable democratic order. We use debate and elections to resolve political disputes, not violence. And it's all worked for hundreds of years. But the system, and don't forget this, is fragile. It will break unless our leaders commit to preserving it. Democracy may or may not die in darkness. It definitely will die in a hail of bullets. Tammy Bruce is a radio talk show host and a keen observer of what's going on in this country. She joins us now. Tammy,
Hi.
Where's this going?
You know, historically, unfortunately, we know where it's going. This is predictable and predicted. Historically, wherever the left has been in power, and either it's to get power or if someone tries to move them out of power, the movement is to do violence. It's a dynamic where they realize that in order to have the cultural dynamic continue, the only way to maintain power is to silence those who are against them or those who do not conform, and of course that takes the form of violence. In the 20th century, of course, just 3 countries, Soviet Union, Communist China, and the Khmer Rouge in Cambodia.
Right.
Estimates are up to about 70 million people killed simply in order to maintain power. So this is what we have to be aware of. While our system is genius and brilliant, it's the leftist ideology that is new, and that our system in a lot of ways also allows to effectively breed in a way. And if we don't decide to take steps to condemn it, and as you've said in your opening, Tucker, whether it's Elizabeth Warren, Hillary Clinton put out a tweet today saying that the Republican Party is the death party. After an attempted assassination of 22 GOP leaders at that baseball field, even Barack Obama, who's never at a loss for words, has said nothing publicly to condemn it or to tell people to step back. This is my worry, that the silence is also in a certain way could be interpreted as acquiescence and in some ways encouragement.
Well, see, that's what shocks me. I mean, I don't think any political movement ought to be held liable for the lunacy of its fringes. I mean, there are lunatics on all sides,
right,
for sure, and I've met some of them. But I do think that the people in charge, in power, in authority, have a moral responsibility to set the limits of behavior and
right,
to say, you know, that's totally wrong. You're not allowed to do that. Violence is outside the pale. They're not doing that. Where's the New York Times editorial denouncing this kind of stuff?
Right. See, this is it. And even if, let's say you had taken, Tucker, a week off, the week that the shooting happened in Arlington, and you unplugged and you weren't connected, just in returning 1 week later, with looking at the headlines online or otherwise, you never would have even have known that it occurred. And we're not going to be able to stop this unless we're willing to admit that it's happening, admit what the core sources of this. And remember, it's also, we've been looking at masked violent individuals trying to interrupt the inaugural on our campuses, the Occupy movement, the Black Lives Matter movement. It's changed from trying to engage everyone as a whole to the suggestion that this disruption is appropriate, that violence, arson is the way to go. And even then, not only were there not condemnations of it, but the left funded it and held it effectively to some degree as heroism. And that also, for Americans and everyone around the world, we're now awash in violence because of terrorism. We see it all over the world. It inures people to it, and that's another dynamic that's affecting our young people here, that, oh, this is normal. Well, someone's got to start saying that it's not.
I think that's a really smart point. Wasn't this inevitable, though, the minute the people in charge began to use terms like resistance or started to say things like don't legitimize the president? Because what they're really saying is it's not worth having a conversation. It's not worth debating. Talking isn't enough.
Right.
Doesn't that set the stage for violence once you say that?
Well, it does. My first book, actually, now 17 years ago, talked about groupthink. And that's when you start to believe that you have sole possession of the truth. And that everyone else, if you've got sole possession of the truth, obviously no one else does. And that makes them, well, not only not as good as you, but not even worthy. And when you start to cast individuals as less than human, as people who are actually out to get you, there's really only one answer to how you react to that. And it's shocking, after the Arlington attempted assassinations, the fact that the rhetoric has not really shifted is the shocking point. And people on both sides of the aisle, certainly Democrats, good liberals out there, need to start demanding from their heroes of Sanders and Warren and Hillary to do more than a single statement, but to really stay with it and to encourage people to step back from this.
That's exactly right, because as you said at the outset, we can see exactly where this is going.
Yeah.
Tammy Bruce, thanks. That was wise.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.